My name is Orvil McKinnis. I work for Summers Engineering out of Hanford, California. I'm here today representing the San Joaquin River Watershed Quality Coalition. I'm here today to talk to you about some of the coalition issues as it pertains to pesticide detection, toxicity issues, and other related things. And so I appreciate your attention this morning. Appreciate you being here, coming to another meeting. I realize in giving these meetings and talks all the time that one of the things I hear from growers is another meeting, and you can look at it that way, but I really appreciate that you take all this seriously. You come here to hear this stuff, and hopefully we take what we learn back to the farm and try to apply some practices and some new knowledge that may help us on our farm and protect water quality. And so we begin this morning. Again, my name is Orvil with Summers Engineering. I'm the program manager for the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. And today we're going to be presenting a summary of some historical monitoring results, as well as some new requirements of the long-term Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. How many here today are in the Westside Coalition? Show of hands. And I'm going to guess some of you are in the Fresno area, and you're with the Kings River group. Yeah, there's great. If you're a grower today and you're irrigating any kind of a crop for commercial purposes.
Don't forget the east side.
Well, we got east side folks here. Well,
We're going to leave?
you might want to leave. We're gonna accuse you of everything bad. Appreciate the east side guys being here. They got a great group over there with Barry Clausen and the Cures people, and again, we appreciate you all being here. And so I'm going to guess the long-term Irrigated Land Regulatory Program is not new to you. You've heard this before. And our coalition, we cover the west side of the San Joaquin River from Tranquility on the south all the way up to Vernalis on the north, anything west of the San Joaquin River. And our purpose is to help growers comply with water quality regulations. These aren't my regulations, these are the state regulations. And because you're a farmer in the state of California, and specifically in the Central Valley, you're required to have a discharge permit to discharge water that has a potential to impact the rivers, and most explicitly here is the San Joaquin River. And in lieu of each one of us having a discharge permit, the state has said, well, we can form coalitions, which from my perspective, because it provides me a job, thank you, I appreciate that, I really do. We form coalitions, and it's easier for you guys to be able to comply with the regulation working through a coalition system. And so specifically, we manage monitoring and reporting, which every grower, if you're growing in California, you're required to have monitoring and reporting on your specific facility, on your farming facility. And again, because of the coalition process, we do that for you on your behalf. We do it in a watershed level, which makes a lot more sense, we believe. And so we report both for the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, and the Westside Coalition is also involved with the chlorpyrifos and TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load program on the San Joaquin River, which is very important. And we'll talk a little bit later as we get into the chlorpyrifos issue. We'll talk just a little bit about that. So map of our coalition. Again, it's Tranquility down in this area here, all the way up into Vernalis this way. And this is the San Joaquin River, and we're everything west of that. And we go all the way to the foothills. That's the map that the regional board has drawn for us. There isn't very much irrigated agriculture in the mountains up there to our west, but again, we cover that complete area. And so we sample monthly. We also are required in that yearly regimen to do 2 rain events a year. We haven't had much rain, so we've taken what we could get and call it a rain event. Boy, it'd be great to have full rivers, wouldn't it, with rain and all that, but unfortunately it wasn't the case. And so what we collect the samples for, EC, electroconductivity, dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, these are basic water quality parameters. The general chemistry, TDS. This is a real big issue. TDS, levels of salt. We deal with that here. A lot of it comes from the water coming coming down the rivers onto our fields, but nonetheless it's something that we are concerned with. E. coli is the fecal matter in the water is a real contentious issue where that comes from, but nonetheless we're to test for that, metals, boron, arsenic, selenium, these kinds of things, and nutrients, nitrogen. How many know nitrogen is a big issue right now? Nitrate in the groundwater, it's a real big issue. And it's a real big driver of this program. That's why we've got this program really steamed up the way it is now, is because of all the nitrate issues in groundwater that people have been complaining about, I guess, for years. And so we also, we're testing for about 50 different pesticides, active ingredients, and also we test for legacy pesticides, DDT and the degraded DDE and such. By the way, I'm not a scientist and I'm not an engineer. I'm an analyst. I take the data that the scientists and the engineers give me, I analyze that, and then I tell you what the problem is. Try to tell you what the problem is. There's about 12 gallons of water collected at each site. And in our West Side Coalition, we have 2 sampling crews. If you know where the Newman Wasteway is, near Gustine, from that south is the south crew, and above that all the way to Vernalis is the north crew. And so we have 2 crews out there once a month that are collecting water. And the cost is about $2,400 per site per month. This is just for lab work. And that's only if the water doesn't test for anything critical in it. If we do detect other pesticides at higher levels, we're required to do we call it a TIE, toxicity identification, evaluation, and then there are other tests that go along with that. It could be upwards of $5,000 per site per month. And I mentioned the cost of this because the company I work for, on behalf of you, they write a check to pay for these labs that do this, but ultimately, really, you're writing a check. And it's important to understand that what you do on the farm, how you practice farming, it can affect water quality perhaps, and there's no one making any accusations today. I know you're all trying to do your best, but once again, it affects the bottom line, and it comes from your wallet. It's not mine. It comes directly from your farm. And here's some of the results, and these are real important. The water flea toxicity. I know what the water flea is, Serradaphnia dubiae, and we test that. They put water in these creatures together, and then we get these. They die off. They count how many die, and we know if it's toxic or not. There were, for the water flea, 2 exceedances in 2012, 8 to 2013, and we believe that it's getting better because there's only been 1 exceedance of that. Algae, we test algae, and that picks up the diuron and other types of herbicides that are being used and end up in our waterways. And this is the real critical one here, ammonia. We're checking for that. And we're just starting a nitrogen program in the West Side Coalition. You should have gotten your forms. By the way, just as a kind of a quick survey, how many have gotten the nitrogen form in the mail from the West Side? Great, great. And you need to fill that out this year. It doesn't need to be certified, but keep it on farm, have it ready in case there is an inspection by the state, not us. And so you can see that the different exceedances there, chlorpyrifos. This is the real bugaboo here. Thank you. 7 in 2013, 13 in 2013, 14 in 2014. I'll show you a graph a little bit later to illustrate these numbers. Of course, we've got the diazonine issue here. We can see those numbers 0, 8, and 0. Malathion, 4, 4, and 0. Malathion appears to be on the west side anyway, that it's no longer being used, or it's being used very minimally. But what we've noticed is that people have just exchanged malathion for some other chemical. We're finding now new pesticides, insecticides and such in the water sampling. And then on the bottom there, it's kind of squiggled there a little bit, if I can use that word, is diuron 9, 5, and 3. And I highlight these 3 years because it's a critical number of a 3-year period. The state regulation says that if we have 2 pesticide exceedances for a constituent at any monitoring site in 3 years, so 2 and 3 years, we have to create a management plan. That's one of the other things I do. I create management plans. And the idea with the management plan is how do we get the grower, and I guess it goes without saying, pesticides are detected, you guys use pesticides, the state says then it's most likely you guys. And we don't always agree with that, but there is a correlation, if you would be honest about that. There is a correlation between pesticide use in ag and finding these things in our ag drains and such. And we're also noticing something too, that we think many times growers are using exactly as the label says. They're using exactly as they're supposed to, and it's still showing up. And so it's not always clear what we're going to do to stop those kind of things, but again, they are problems that we're trying to deal with to help you with. And we talked about a management plan, so this is what this is, the Salt Slough Focus Plan. It's a management plan, and that we picked this for this particular group because this is of particular interest to you guys that farmed out of this area, the Los Palos area. These are sites, the Salt Slough at Lander Avenue, Salt Slough at Sandam, and the Posal Slough at Indiana Avenue. And so we focus mainly for Paraphos, the Loris Band, and Lock On, Newfos, Governor, Scout, Durs Band. We got Lock On there, you got Lock On, Warhawk. I mean, there are several names that it's used on, trade names that it's used under, but the main ingredient is Paraphos. And it's a constituent of concern in this valley. Because of the San Joaquin River issue, it's been in the San Joaquin River, the state of California, DPR, the State Water Resources Control Board, the regional board, they've all been really focused on trying to get the chlorpyrifos detections eradicated. And I use the word eradicated because that's exactly what we have to do. If we have 2 exceedances for chlorpyrifos in any 3-year period, we have to do a management plan. And I say that now because we're doing management plans already for chlorpyrifos, but it's not helping. And so at the coalition level, we're really struggling to try to get the chlorpyrifos detections to go away. And if we can get the chlorpyrifos detections to go away, perhaps we can save the chemical from being registered and you having to do an NOI to get it. That's already happening in the Stanislaus County area. I think it's May or June, it's going to be registered up there. And any grower that wants to use it's going to have to go in and fill out an NOI and report to the state in a more direct way when he's using that chemical. And the NOI is interesting because now the state has a direct interface with you. They know when you use it, how you use it, and all these different issues. So you're going to be more of a target for the chlorpyrifos use. So we want to try to get those detections down. We're also checking for diuron, and we're doing aquatic toxicity. We're sampling with the creatures and seeing if they live or die. And so here's some sites that we looked at on that slide earlier. The chlorpyrifos, we can see that at Posal Slough, there's a real issue, and all these chemicals here are showing up at these sites. And again, to keep in mind that number, 3-year period, 2 detections in any one 3-year period. So we've got a plan for malathion, diuron, or chlorpyrifos because of the water clean toxicity, these things, algae tox. These sites and all the others that have 2 detections in those 3-year period, we've got some real issues there that we're having to deal with. And so I thought it would be interesting to try to highlight some good points because whenever I speak before the regional board, the state, or the DPR, wherever it's at, I represent you on your behalf, the grower. I want to present the best picture I can. I represent you ethically, honestly, and as positively as I can. So it's great to be able to say, look, we've done some great things with diosmin. We've done some really wonderful things here. The San Joaquin River, Sandam, just a little south of here. It's great to say that the water's clean there. And so we want to highlight some really good things. And the sediment's a real issue. Sediment's an issue because pyrethroid chemicals, these are the more newer chemicals that are on the market you're using. They attach themselves to the sediment. And then if sediment moves off your farm, they go down into the waterway, can potentially end up at the San Joaquin River, and we will find those things there. So when sediment's good, there's no toxicity, that's a really good thing for us. Also, chlorpyrifos though it's not pyrethroid, it does attach itself to sediment. It collects itself a little bit there. We find it in the sediment, and so it's a real problem. But again, it's a good thing down in this area right now. Here's some things that are not so bad. Again, we talked about that number 2 and 3 years. These sites here are, and I guess the background on this, that when we started the monitoring in 2004, everything was through the roof. Every chemical that we tested for just about was showing up. The major chemicals, not all 50. But the numbers have come down. We're seeing better results. And these are the results of that. This is, I think, on the ground, you guys are doing a better job, and these numbers aren't so bad. That being said, this is not so great. Chlorpyrifos is a real issue. As I said earlier, in fact, I spoke with the Ag Commissioner of Stanislaus County, Milton O'Hare, yesterday, and he confirmed what we were already thinking, that this year the chlorpyrifos is going to be registered up there. It's going to be much harder to use, more difficult to use, and most likely people won't use it because of that difficulty in it, and it's they'll switch to other chemicals that aren't as effective. And so it's important from a monetary standpoint, from the way you operate your facilities, your farms, that if we can get the chlorpyrifos detections in our area, your area down, we can show improvement, then the state is not so inclined to come in and require the counties to register the chemical. And so, again, we've had some real issues at Colesville Slough. Empirically, that means just from my observation, the detections in Colesville Slough are actually kind of diminishing a little bit. But it appears that it's simply because there's not any drain water in the slough at times when we're checking. Then going back and looking at the data, almost every time we check Colesville Slough, chlorpyrifos is there. It's a real problem. And so we've got to work really hard at minimizing that and getting these detections down. Again, we can see diazonon wasn't a big issue, but these other chemicals, diuron, malathion, and again, malathion is tapering down, but still, we still have to have the management plan in place because we've had those detections in the last 3 years. And then these toxicity tests, and I know it seems, well, what we're testing against little creatures and stuff, but the problem is that when we have these creatures that are dying with these tests, it indicates that there's a problem in the water body itself, and there's a potential for people to drink this, which causes the problem. And so here are the detections of chlorpyrifos and diazonine. We can see right away that diazonine just kind of, beginning in 2008, the detections, we had 3, it dropped down to 1 for the next 3 years, and in 2012 we haven't seen it, and it's because it's not being used. And it's unfortunate, but we appreciate the effort that you guys have decided to change your practices, no longer use the diazonine, because it is a constituent of concern in the San Joaquin River. But here's the interesting part, and I wanted to show you this graph here. In 2008, there were 13 detections. Now, understand, these detections, these are in your area. Diazonine throughout our coalition is a real issue. Maybe it's a little worse in the north than it is down here. But it's still an issue down here. We had 13 detections 2008 to a low of, we had 3 detections in 2010, 11, and 12. It rose in 2013. It rose again in 2014. And the preliminary results in 2015 is it's going to be back up to where it was in 2008. The problem with all this, we're talking today amongst ourselves. We're looking at these charts, but I have to report those results twice a year, every year. And I give those charts to the state. They look at that. And they tell me, they ask me, what are you doing to prevent these detections, to get the chemical from being in the waterways? And we explain what we're doing, the management plans, that we talk with the growers, that we've provided information, that we go out on the farm and talk about new practices, but yet the detections are still rising up. Now for the east side guys, I'd like to blame them. I'd like to say, you know what? They're trucking their dirty water over to the west side and dumping it over on us, and we're doing everything right. It's all their fault, but that's not the case, as far as we know. And look, we go out, we talk with growers. We never come out with an accusatory, we never make accusations. What we do, and I'm doing this right now because we had 7 detections in the north on January 13th. We tested 7 sites, all 7 sites tested positive for chlorpyrifos in numbers that were off the chart. Major issue. When the county commissioner calls me, I see in this whole scheme, I'm nobody. But when he calls me and wants to talk to me, there's a real problem. I've got a text on my phone from him. He wants to sit down and talk with me about how we're going to work through this issue. It's a real problem up there. And if we can't fix this, it's going to be the same problem down here. Chlorpyrifos is going to go away. And so I wanted to highlight that, illustrate that to you. And again, I don't accuse anyone, but the detections are there. And we have to do as growers, you have to do everything you can to minimize these detections. And so just to talk a little bit real quick about our coalition, in January of last year, there was a new program. It had new requirements. The surface water program remained about the same. We've got all these management plans that we're required to do. And when we talk about a management plan, that's me calling you or sending you something and asking you to tell me, what do you do on the farm? You're giving me your practices. And the idea is we're trying to find people that maybe have practices that aren't quite in line with current standards and can give you some suggestions, some help, try to provide some funding if it's available so you can do some on-farm things. And so our surface water program remains about the same, but the real issue is new groundwater requirements. Groundwater is a real big hot topic in California. It's going to remain so for the into the near future. It's just going to be a real big issue. Beyond just simply the chemicals that might be in the groundwater, the pesticides and nitrates and things, but how much water can be drawn out, who owns it. All these things are going to be a topic of concern in our state and in our valley. And so there's new groundwater requirements that have come into this program. These are just being ramped up now. The nitrate forms that you've got, this is part of that. We'll be doing well sampling and along the way to try to find out if what we're doing on the ground is helping the nitrate issue or making it worse, or to try to find some scientific reasoning for what's going on. And this also requires more grower involvement. You never had to do the amount of paperwork you're doing now because of the program I administer. And I really do apologize for that. The last thing you need is another stack of paperwork to have to deal with after a hard day on the farm, in the office and such. But there it is. We can't make the regulation go away. I wish I could. People call me every day, and I'm serious. I get at least a dozen calls a day. Why do I have to do this? This program has been in existence since 2003. And so we're still wondering, why do we have to do this? We're doing our best to minimize the impact to your farms, but we have to do it. It's a state regulation. You can go with the coalition, or you can say, you know what, I'd rather just deal with the state on my own. You can get an individual waste discharge permit, and you can do all the reporting and monitoring yourself, but we can't make the program go away. And so there we are, there's more grower involvement. You're going to be more involved with what's going on with your farm and the state. So there are new groundwater monitoring requirements. There's a groundwater assessment report that's it's being developed right now. It's in a draft form. It's going to be released to the state, the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I believe it's on the 15th of this month, next week. And it's in draft form. They'll look at it, they'll go through it, they'll check our science and what we've come up with in that report, and they'll come back to us with some comments and some edits they may want. We'll go back at it. But this document that is going to be used to determine where there's high vulnerability areas for nitrate to groundwater. And so we know some areas already, but we don't know all the areas. And there's a lot that goes into this report. It's not just simply taking well data, but soil types and slope and all these other things have been used into consideration. And again, as I said, it's due out mid-March. And it's going to define these areas for groundwater monitoring of nitrogen mostly. That'll be the main issue with salts and certain pesticides. So here's some new requirements for you, and this shouldn't be new to our guys in our coalition, nor in the east side or the others. But you guys that are in these high vulnerability areas for surface water and groundwater, and we don't, because the groundwater assessment report's not done yet, we don't know exactly where high vulnerability is for groundwater, but we do for surface water, because that's where these management plans come in, this focused management plan. for the salt slough area, you're part of that. So everybody is, for surface water, you're in a high vulnerable area, and it requires you to submit a farm evaluation plan by March 1st every year. You just got done with this, or you submitted it last December, and you'll be seeing another one come late in the fall or early winter that will have to be filled out and sent back to us again. We hope to streamline that process and try to tell you what you did last year, and if nothing changes, check the box and send it back. But if there are changes, then you'll have to go through the whole plan again. And again, the high vulnerable areas in groundwater is to be determined, and we're going to develop, if you're in a high vulnerable area, you're going to have to develop a nitrogen management plan. And that's why we sent these out. We don't know yet who's in these areas. We wanted you to have the form. It doesn't have to be certified. It asks for a few things that you may know, or some things you might have to have a little test done or something, but nonetheless get the plan in and have it on your farm and fill those numbers out for us. And then there's also coming a sediment of discharge erosion report. We're going to submit that this month also. And if you're in an area that has a potential to discharge sediment to the rivers and to the waterways, come September 2015, you're going to have to do a plan for sediment control. And basically it just says, here's what I'm doing already on my farm. You're going to have that certified, and the professional's going to look at it and say, well, maybe you should be doing this, this, or this. It'll be like interfacing with your PCA or your CCA on crop management and pesticide use. And to be honest with you, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I don't like having to instruct you on these things that are coming down the pike. But again, these are in the regulation, and we can't make it go away. And then another thing you're required to do is attend one meeting at least annually. And we've just done a set of meetings in our area for the nitrogen plan. We'll be scheduling other meetings along out through the year. We'll get you notified of that so you can attend if you haven't attended one. There'll be meetings like this where you come and we'll present to you material that is relevant to what you're doing on your farms and what's happening in our coalition. And then we're really, at the end of this, the idea is to get you to implement best management practices for the industry. And I know that we can see a trend from, especially in the tree and nut fruit people and the grapes and such, that you're moving from furrow and flood irrigation, you're moving into drip irrigation. That's a great thing. That minimizes, to almost nothing, any discharge off your land. It's a great practice. But not everybody is implementing those, and not everybody is using the best practices perhaps with furrows and different types of crops that way. And we're just trying to help you to understand what you can do on farm that will minimize these pesticide detections so we can get the state off your back. And so here's some of our responsibilities as a coalition, and understand that if you were an individual trying to do this on your own, this would be what you would be doing. We conduct education and outreach. That's why I'm here today. This is something I'll put in my report, that I was at a meeting, I had this many people attend, there were this many people responded from our coalition, and I'll note that we're out, educating people, informing people. We conduct regional monitoring. This is a real big issue, folks. This alone is a $600,000 a year investment. $600,000 a year, every year, to monitor these creeks and waterways. And so we conduct that regional monitoring. We have management practice effectiveness evaluation. It's a big, long word that we're going to be doing studies on farms, and we're going to approach some of you perhaps and ask you to let us come on and put probes in under the root zone of your crops. And the idea is to try to find out where nitrogen is going. We've got to do this. This is something we have to do. The state is very, very interested. In fact, they're mandated by the governor to find out where nitrogen goes. When you apply it on the ground or in a foliar way, it goes to the crop. Where does the excess nitrogen go? And we're going to try to discover that. It's a big, big process. We don't know how effective we can be, but we're mandated to do that. And so when we do reach out to you, that's what it's all about. We're trying to get people to get involved so that we can do these studies and find out what is happening to nitrogen. We're doing this now, the groundwater assessment report. This is a big issue again. It's going to set the tone for the areas we're going to study first with the nitrate issue in groundwater. And then when we do all of these things, we report back to the regional board the results of everything we're studying, everything we're doing, everything we've analyzed, and we provide it in a big gigantic report. Trust me, it's about 450 pages. It's about that thick. I do it twice a year. And I hope someone reads it. Because I went to all the trouble to do it. And so that concludes my portion of this morning. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
On the nitrogen management, does that all have to be new derived information, or is there a library of well logs and that kind of thing that you get to use plus what you're doing?
I'm sorry, are we talking about the nitrogen management plan
That I am.
that you're going to be filling out for us? Or for yourself,
On
actually?
the study you said you're going to start testing for?
Oh, yeah, well, the management practice implementation program, yes. We're using some existing data, but many times there's data gaps. We don't have data everywhere that we need it. And so we'll be going to those places to try to find out what the nitrogen levels are in those areas.
There's bound to be a lot of information already available.
There's a ton of information available. Some of it's real old and dated, and we'd like to know what's happened to it since the 1950s or 60s.
Yeah, and it's good to compare how things used to be done to the way we're doing it today.
Exactly. Any other questions, ma'am?
Pozo Slough is really high with their issues. What are they doing to help?
Apparently not enough. No, I don't want to say that.
Isn't vegetation supposed to help to keep all the
Yes, ma'am.
monitors? So shouldn't they not be dredging and all of that? Let it grow, or?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, because in the Pozo Slough, and in fact all these sloughs here, that the person at the top of the thing, they start the process off of putting water in there, but as it goes down, people are taking that, reapplying it onto their land. And so if you have vegetation in that ditch, the vegetation is drinking the water.
Right.
It's a good thing that it does that, because it's stopping some of the sediment and some of the chemicals will stop there. It's a good thing. But in these really short water years, the plants do drink a lot of water, the weeds. But they are implementing management practices. We're helping that. They've got projects down there recirculating water to try to keep the water on farm. And I guess that's the best thing we can do, is keep the water on farm. But they are implementing practices. But as we say, it doesn't appear to be enough right now. And so we as a coalition are reaching out to those people on behalf of the entire coalition, because everything that happens, and you guys are down in this area, whatever happens up north, it's affecting you too, because you're in that coalition. But we're trying our best to get the people in these areas where we have issues to implement better practices to stop this. We're actively working with these people to try to get them to help us. Any last questions?
In a time when we have plenty of water, it seems like there'd be a higher flushing effect in these sloughs than there would be now, when people aren't putting near as much drain water into drains that would. So you might be getting a more concentrated test than in the past.
Well, I'm not a scientist. You're right, there is a diluting factor. But because we're required to check, say, chlorpyrifos 0.0015. That's
No, I understand that.
0.15 parts per million, microliters per gram. It's just,
Well, if you dilute it with another 10,000 acre feet of drain water,
Yeah.
it might not be getting this year. It's possible.
it's possible. But again, we have to demonstrate that by monitoring.
Yes.
However, even in good years, where we have that diluting effect go on, the chemical is still present in the water. We go back to 2003, 4, it wasn't as bad as it is now. We're finding it in the waterways. And we got better, but there's this reversing trend, and perhaps what you're talking about is taking place. We won't know until we get a better water here coming back.
It's all about the insect cycle.
Well, you also mentioned what the toxicologists have always taught me is dilution is the solution to pollution. By and large, but still, there's a legal requirement to keep it on your farm anyway, on all these pesticides. So it's going to be an ongoing issue to improve.